Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon for those that are on the next time zone. Thank you for joining us today. We are very fortunate to have Desiree and David join us for our next iteration of the Fireside Chat. Today, we're going to be talking about being a CEO. I'm going to turn it over to Stephen just for a minute, and then we'll get into the subject matter. Stephen.
Thanks, James. Great to be here with everyone and really excited for another fireside chat. We've got some fantastic guests. James, did you already go through and introduce them?
No, we're going to let them introduce themselves. They're better at it than we could ever be. Desiree's got a great one, and I love hearing them do it. So,
and fair enough. Nobody tells their story like the person who's lived it, all the passion, all the knowledge, all the insight. So we're excited to hear from everybody today. I do want to kind of note, though, we do have some other fun things going on at Foresight that I feel I'd be remiss if I didn't mention. We do have SDG Connect, so a United Utilities info webinar coming up on the 16th, tomorrow. We have a programs information webinar on Friday, the 18th. So if you know of any startup that you think might benefit from Foresight's programs, this is a chance for them to come out and listen and ask questions and understand all the different things that we do. We'll also have some guests coming in there, some folks who have gone through the programs in the past to share their experience and what they like. So that's a great event. You can register for that on our website, and we'll also drop a link in the chat that you can share with people. Surfacing Solutions, Microplastics and Water on the 22nd, Canada Netherlands Water Technology Matchmaking on the 23rd, and the BC Clean Tech Awards on the 24th. I'm excited about that because I might see some people in person. So I might leave the house, which is going to be exciting. So if you happen to be in Vancouver, unfortunately, it is invite only because of the restrictions, but you can catch that online. So all of these things are on our events page. Please do take a second to check them out if any of them kind of resonate with you. With that, I'll turn it over to you, James.
Thanks, David. So welcome, everybody. We do have two fantastic CEOs. The point of this conversation is, what does it mean to be a CEO? Often in our early stages of company setup, I like to say that the CEO is there by default, of default of no one else being actually there. What we've actually got is two exceptionally experienced serial entrepreneurs that understand what it means to take a company from where they're at through multiple stages and get them to exit. They're going to share with us their do's, their don'ts, their things that they've messed up on, and how do you manage risks, and what does it actually mean to be a CEO? So we're going to turn it over now for those participating on our thing. We do have a Q&A session. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll have Q&A. Please drop your questions in there. We will do our best to address every single one of them. And it's easier than actually managing it through the chat. So please do the Q&A. And let me turn it over to Desiree and David to introduce themselves and share with us their stories about being a CEO. Desiree.
Thanks, James. Hello, everyone. I'm Desiree Vomino, CEO and Chief Disruption Officer for SureCall. As James mentioned, I have a number of businesses that I started and am working with. I'm also the current chair of the Calgary Chamber of Commerce and sit on a number of boards, and I love to do philanthropic work. So that's me, and over to you, David.
Yeah, thanks, Desiree. Thanks very much. I'm happy to be here today. And James and Stephen, thanks for having me on to the Fireside Chat as well. So background for myself. So today I'm the CEO of Virum. Virum's a SaaS company. We're headquartered here in Calgary, and we've got clients around the globe. We've gone through seed stage funding through Series A. We're approaching a Series B. So we've seen some exponential growth over the last couple of years, which has been great. We took the company from, 8 employees to north of 40 over the last couple of years. And prior to joining Virum, I had a couple other additional roles. I've always worked in a technology capacity, started my career with IBM, and then joined in an entrepreneurial capacity as a co-owner of Pivot Data Centers, which we eventually sold to Rogers Communications back in 2013. And then I joined Rogers, and then later joined Shaw as their vice president and GM of their cloud and data center solutions here up in Canada. And that's actually where I had the opportunity to meet Desiree for the first time. She probably remembers back, and it was SureCall was a client of Shaw's, and unfortunately we had a network and cloud outage that was stateside that impacted Desiree. So I came in to have a conversation about how we were going to, make this better. And that's where our relationship really started. And believe it or not, when I became a finalist for the ENY Prairie's Entrepreneur of the Year, Desiree happened to be one of the judges that I got to meet as well. So we go back a few steps. So happy to be here today.
Thank you both for that. Where I'd like to actually start is, I think a number of us have actually gone through multiple degrees and classes and stuff, and but we've never actually, no one's ever addressed what does it mean to be a CEO? What do you do, and what is it that you're not supposed to be doing? Any thoughts on that, Desiree?
Well, I think, to be a really great CEO, it's really about, I know we talk about servant leadership and supporting your team. And, if you don't like the word servant, think empowering leadership or enabling leadership. It's all about how you support your team to be successful. I think, one of the critical things that you have to possess is the ability to stay calm in a crisis and thrive under pressure, right? When things start to get challenging, everyone depends on the CEO or the leader to get them through it. So I think, your job is basically, here's the one thing. You want to make sure that your team is not status quo, right? So you want to keep things very moving along and maybe a little uncomfortable, but you also need to be there to support your team and help your team let your team know that you're there to help them to be successful. So it's really more of a role, to me anyways, about supporting your team and helping your team to be successful than it is to be, some kind of, top-down leader making all the decisions. I think you make your decisions with your team. David?
Yeah, no, I agree completely. And I think depending on the stage your company may be in, whether it's in, startup mode, scale up mode, or if you're, in a true enterprise spirit, there's different roles that the CEO plays. Now, critically, the most important one is making sure that the business has capital to operate. So plain and simple, make sure you've got capital in the coffers to continue to grow. And then it's about attracting the right talent and putting the right people in the right seats. Okay, so those are the two key pieces. But what develops over time as you're growing a business is your culture, right? And it is the most important thing. It is the bedrock of how you are going to perform in the market. How you treat your employees is how they are going to treat your clients. And you have to build that level of trust that what you say is what you're going to do. That needs to be replicated, and to create a loyal and high trust environment is an absolute key to success. I don't care what technology you've invented or what service you're delivering. If that front line and your interactions with clients isn't pure and consistent and of high trust, you can't scale and grow your business, because you can't be everywhere. As you get bigger and bigger, that next level of leadership needs to believe in the company's values. They need to be able to emulate and be as excited as you are to be driving the company forward.
I like to say, I think you've actually hit exactly the way I think about it is set the direction for the company and how you're going to behave. Make sure you have the right asses in the right seats, and make sure you don't run out of money. And I think that pretty much sums it up. So it sounds like a pretty easy job. Now, what happens when things go wrong? Because I think the only thing we know as when we're dealing with companies and we're working with companies, especially at this stage, is that it's not if something's going to go wrong. It's just a matter of timing of when. And how do you deal with that when you're, like, you've talked about the culture and making sure you actually have proper culture. It's really dangerous if you don't know, like, there's the freight train coming at you and it hits you because team hasn't let you know or something's going on. How do you make sure you build that culture? Like, we've heard I know Clyde Beddoes actually was kind of an interesting one because when he actually got on planes, he was always the last one to leave, and he was the one cleaning. So he actually set by example what the expectations were. How do you deal with setting up that culture? It's not just a word; it's actual real behaviors. Thoughts about that, Desiree?
Yeah, so in my organizations, culture is our strategy. So when you have the right culture and the right team, you can do just about anything. But it also ensures that when things aren't going well, as you said, or if something goes dramatically wrong, your team, will stick by you. It takes an average of 7 years to build a culture and approximately 7 days to rip it down. So, all you have to do is, one wrong hire and leave that person there, or have the wrong understanding of what it takes to make a great corporate culture. So one of the things that sort of I learned around culture is to let go of your ego. As an entrepreneur and a performance driven individual, it's normal to have an ego, right? After all, you need something to drive results. However, you need to keep that in check, because the way you treat your people is going to, at the end of the day, sort of connect them to, that trust and transparency that David was talking about. People are not loyal to organizations. People are loyal to other people. So it's really, really important that you develop that connection and that relationship with your team, and that team connects to each other, and that you support that development of that connection, right? So one of the things we've done is we have a flat organization, meaning that we actually have no titles within the organization. Like CEO is not on my door. If you walk into our organization, there are no titles. So everyone sort of treats each other as an equal, and everyone has equal right to say whatever they feel they need to say to make the organization run successfully. And then when we go outside of our environment, of course, we have our titles, because the rest of the world needs that to feel like they're talking to the right people, or whatever that they need to have. So really, to me, it's about that, utilizing culture as a strategy within your organization.
Yeah, and I think Desiree hit it right. It's about building the trust with your organization and leading by example. When we would have clients into our offices for a presentation, and every deal is critical when you're scaling up. I remember walking in and seeing that the whole floor was muddy just from spring boots, and the first thing I do is I go and grab the mop and start cleaning this up, right? Because you want to put your best impression forward. You want this to go as seamless as possible. You take ownership of that, but it's a signal to everyone else in the company that there's no job or task below anybody, right? And when we hire for whether it's a VP role or anything, I make it very clear to say what this company does not need right now is a bunch of other generals in the Army coming in. I need a whole bunch of sergeants that are willing to roll up their sleeves and be there with the troops. So that's the type of individuals that we're hiring, and those are the people that we want in our company.
And it's funny you should say that, because I remember running an organization, when I was running the foreign bank in the country, and when it came time to go to Costco to pick up the office supplies, well, we went to Costco and we picked up the office supplies. Like, you get to do everything. There's no I agree with you 100%. There's no I'm above this or below this. You just have to get it done. So there's a couple of things I want to go on that. Is like, how do you know when you have the right people in the right seats, and how do you know what do you do when there's a wrong person? Is it a wrong person, or is a person wrong in a certain seat? How do you make those assessments to know? And what happens when, like, have you ever seen this where we know we've seen it in the oil patch and other places? What happens when you're the wrong person? You're now the wrong CEO now for the organization. Have you seen those things, and what do you? Let's go there for a little bit.
Yeah, I can start off on that one for sure. So I think your question on whether you're the right CEO and at what stage, or how do you identify that. But I think the root of your question is, how do you find the right people, or how do you know if you've got the wrong person in the wrong seat perhaps, and they're idling your business, or in fact actually maybe pulling it backwards. because the human element is so important in growing, you need to be able to quickly identify any toxic traits or personalities that might exist in your business. And I could tell you that you need to action those immediately. And if you do, and I've seen this before because I've done it in a previous role where we had 20 individuals on staff, and 3 of them we determined were highly toxic, and we took them out, and the business became so refreshed and far more productive by taking away people that we thought were so instrumental and couldn't be replaced. But in fact, they were absolute anchors on the business. So you've got to flush that out quickly. And your star performers will rise when they see that happen, that poor performance and bad toxicity will not be tolerated in an organization. People want to work in a place that's fun, right? That they feel welcome, trusted, and energized to be there. So if you've got people that are not there, they probably can shine in a different role, maybe in a different company, but they can't be with you any longer. You've got to make those calls.
Yeah, I agree with you, David. You lose good people in your organization when you keep the toxic ones. And so, that's also the other side of it as well, right? People aren't going to stay in an environment where they feel that there's, all of these underlying issues going on and, backstabbing and blame and shame game. So you need to, my philosophy is hire slowly and fire quickly. As soon as you know something is not right, don't wait too long, because again, they do have impact on the other people that are working in your organization. One of the things that we do to try to sort of resolve that, and I kind of saw one of the questions that popped up in there about, the time consuming role of, HR and trying to bring new people into the organization. First of all, we don't have an HR department in our company. I don't believe in HR departments. I believe that if you run your organization in a quality way with a fantastic work environment, you don't need somebody there to, work. People have to go and talk to them about the environment. But we do a profile on the front end before we even see somebody's resume. Normally we don't even look at resumes. All we do is we do a profile. So if somebody wants to work for us, they send, whether we've got it out on an ad in Indeed or wherever it is, they will send us a note saying, of course, they want to apply for the role. All that comes back to them is an immediate link. Please fill out this profile and we'll connect with you. So we don't know who they are, what their name is, what gender they are. There's no bias there. And we have them fill out this profile, which is specifically around not the skill sets as much as the values and behaviors. And they match the values and behaviors of that individual to the top people in our organization who have, that we feel have the best profiles with regards to the type of culture we have. If they score a certain score, they're coming in to have a conversation with us about starting with us. So there's no interview, there's no resume, it's about who they are. That saves a huge amount of time on the front end. And I would say it's been for us about 90% accurate with bringing the right people into the organization. Of course, nothing is 100%.
Yeah.
There's definitely no absolutes in any of this. There's that, and it's so in my past life, I remember when I joined Goldman, it took over a year to join. And it was kind of an interesting thing. It was a very, very long process of joining. And they used to say that very few people could make it happen. Anybody could actually kill it. I think it's actually a really important part, because how you fit into the whole organization, it's that whole, as you've said, that really is the important part, and that's what's going to get you there. It's not about managing risks. It's about, you have to take them and do something. I'd be curious to just have a little bit of fun on this thing. I know we're getting some questions in there, and welcome to, when you're not talking, you can actually respond to some of the people, or we can bring those things up. One of the biggest things that we see is we're going to make mistakes. Like, all of us are going to make mistakes. Okay, so, and we've had sessions on, I know I'm not allowed to say certain things, but we'll just call them F-ups, that like you're going to mess up in this process, and everybody's going to do it. How do you manage to enable that to take place, and then put in place an organization that responds to it? Because these mistakes do happen, and it's really what you do about it, not the fact that they do take place. How do you, like, that's part of your culture. How do you address that and make sure that you can actually do that management? So turn it over to you guys. Hopefully it made sense.
Yeah, no, it did. We're not in the culture of creating punishment for making decisions and they don't work out, right? So, we borrowed this off one of our clients, Patrick over at Jupiter Resources, and it's RUFF, RUFF, which is report the ugly, find the fix. So if we screwed something up client side, if we messed something up on investor relations, anything, think of it, just call it out. Let's get the team together and let's work towards a common solution. So, highlighting areas for improvement or errors that were made in the business, we encourage that dialogue, and we don't make it a punitive piece, right? Like, the day's not done. I'm going to make a couple more mistakes today. I promise you that I will through the journey, but we learn from them and we grow. Everybody's got flaws. We try to make educated decisions with the information that we have in front of us, and it's not complete all the time. So you're going to have errors. Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think you ever will reach your full potential as a person or an organization without having failures. Failure is really lessons learned. And it really helps you to, if you don't fail at something, you don't try to find different ways and, around it. So you can't get creative without failure. So it's important. What's more important, though, is that if people do make a mistake, that it doesn't mean that they're a mistake, right? It's never ever the people, it's generally the process or some other issue. They're not intentionally trying to harm. So I think it's really important that if people fail, that we don't make them feel like they're a failure, that you actually take that and go, okay, what can we learn from this team? And you move forward from there.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, and I like the acronym RUFF. It actually really helps you think about it and the types of culture. Now, there's a couple things that I want to address. So, as a CEO, you are the face of the organization. Okay, so you are the person that you're putting yourself out there to the entire market. And how do you see? Like, I know Michelle Romano had this one comment that, like, if you don't like selling, then you're probably not going to be a very good entrepreneur, because as a CEO, you're selling the organization, you're selling to your employees, you're selling to anybody that's prepared to listen to you and tell the story. How have you set up your own methods for making sure you're outward facing and make sure everybody's actually singing from the same song sheet?
Go ahead, Desiree.
Oh, okay. Well, here's the thing. I'm not the only salesperson. Like, the CEO, of course, is the salesperson, but, in our organization, everybody's in business development is what I say, right? Because if your front line can't talk to your customers about what you do and what's special and unique about your organization, then we're not doing something right in my mind, onboarding our new team members and ensuring that they understand who we are, what our company does, what's the purpose behind our organization, and why we're here. And I think really that's part of our building blocks to keep our team engaged. If they don't really understand and can't be excited and passionate about the organization as much as you are, I don't know how long people will stay in a role in your organization, right? So that's part of the key development of your people, is ensuring that they're able to talk about your business as well as you do. And we commit to weeks and weeks and weeks of training on the front end for our team in order for them to ensure they know who the company is they're joining and what we're all about. We want them to be proud and be able to speak about it.
Yeah, and that's a good point too. And I think I may mess this up at I think it's Zig Ziglar's quote, but he said the sales department is not the whole company, but the whole company better be the sales department. Right. So everybody needs to be able to tell their grandmother exactly what their company does in a very simplistic way that, intrigues people and can show that there's value there. What we do with our client executives, as an example, when they're onboarded and brought in, we bring them through demos and scripts. And to your point, James, the singing from the same song sheet. We don't have any solo acts right now because everybody has to be able to deliver the same messaging in a consistent way for for our brand to really resonate and for us to deliver against that. So coming right down to what are the key words you say when this PowerPoint slide is up is important, right? For us to scale. Otherwise, you've got too many people that are not getting the message properly out, and you can't scale and you can't be effective. So, to be outward facing, in a CEO capacity too, client facing, customer facing, your employee facing, your stakeholder and VC, right? As well as, participating in events such as these or with the chamber or anything like that. You've got to have that same consistency everywhere.
It's interesting because I don't think a lot of large organizations are actually as good at it as I think you can talk to all your employees. You could sit around and talk about what's actually going on. I know Edward Jones has been held out as one of those large organizations where every single person in the organization knows the direction where they're going. So they actually can all repeat it. So it's a really hard thing to actually manage, especially as you're growing, to preserve that culture. But I think it's absolutely critical. Let's switch gears for a minute. And obviously one of the key jobs that you have as a CEO is, as you said, David, you just can't run out of money. This is your responsibility for making sure that everybody's getting paid. And so if you guys would share some of your stories with that, how do you actually manage that? There's one of the questions in the chat about how do you know when that you've actually dealing with a real investor and not somebody that's just kicking tires, or how do you go through your process of, and I know Desiree, you've done this multiple times, so it'd be great to hear what's your thoughts on the fundraising process, keys being successful, and things that you absolutely just have to stay away from, just don't do. So turn that over to both of you.
Yeah, I think probably David would have a better idea. I've always, we've always started with the capitals, so we've never had to really worry or be too concerned about fundraising. I have done investments though where people have come to me to invest into their startup or their business. And I think from that perspective, so looking at it from the other side, I think what I'm always looking at is a very, very strong advisory board, a very, very strong management team. So the team that's going to run the business, the operations, that they have some self-investment in that as well, and that they have a business plan that absolutely is foolproof, and that they've looked at risk. And those are really critical pieces for me to look at, besides, of course, that this is a viable, they've got an MVP and that sort of thing. So, for me, it's, also passion, and that they show that, that they're hungry for it, and that they're going to stick through the tough times, because it's always that first, 25%, right, of startups that, get into it, and then they just can't make it over that one hurdle or that one, challenge that brings them down. And if they had just stuck through it and had a little bit more resilience, they would have got to the point where it was going to be that it would spool up and be successful. So that's just looking at it from an investment perspective, but I think David probably can give a really good idea on when you're the team.
Yeah, first, the second you take institutional money and you establish the board, the game changes for the CEO at that point, right? So you have a responsibility, a fiscal responsibility to your shareholders, right? And your board is there to help manage that risk. So I can put together a budget and a plan and a cash projection, and we've got to kind of work within those parameters. But what I can tell you is, boards hate surprises as much as I hate surprises, and you better go into your board meeting and they better already know what you're going to talk about and present and ask, because you don't spring things in board meetings as, hey, by the way, we're doing this or we've done that. It's not how it works, right? So this is about communication and transparency to build that trust, right? When COVID hit, and if we remember, these are two unique independent events. We went to $0 oil and COVID hit. And we were looking at our cash runway at the time, which was probably about 9 months. And we said, we can either turtle right now and preserve cash and see how long this lasts, or we'll talk to the board. And I think we actually double down and speed up our cash burn and invest and go after this market while everybody else might be looking the other way. And we had some conversations on it, and that's what we ended up doing. And we were fortunate that, we executed, and then we were able to raise a Series A through COVID as well. But it's about, cash is one thing, but it's about milestones. Call one out, hit it, move on to the next, keep growing. That's where you start to get the cash and the interest from the VC community. It's, what did you do with that last chunk of cash you did, right? What did you do with those resources? What was your plan? And did you get there? And why should we give you more? Or why should this round be bigger? One of the questions I think you asked too is, how can you tell if someone's really interested or not? I can also tell you, if VCs are interested in learning more and spending more time, they are interested. They don't have time either, like everyone else, to waste on businesses they don't think might be a fit. So, you've got to have a solid story, and you have got to have a little bit of sizzle on the top to get them excited to invest, right, in your vision as a company.
So sizzle with a steak. Both have
You got it.
There.
Yeah.
When I'm looking at some of the questions, I don't know if you've had a chance to see there's an interesting one that was raised about how do you make sure that you're balancing working on the business versus working in the business. It's important to be looking at, acting inside, but obviously you're also looking, you as the head of this have to be thinking about big picture strategy, where we're going. And I know, so David, you and I've had a chance to work extensively in the past, and one of the things I very appreciate is you're extremely strategic and thoughtful about, which tactics I'm doing, where is this organization going to go, how do I actually get there? And that's obviously working on the business. And obviously it's important to be inside too, but clearly you have to be thinking about where you're actually taking this. And it can be a very lonely job. And thoughts about, like, how do you balance making sure that you're not just drinking your own bathwater? Because Desiree, you actually raised a really important part. You have to have ego. Like, you have to have that confidence to be able to say, you said, pound through on, like, when everything is going absolutely in the worst direction, but I believe in this and I'm not going to stop. I got to keep going. So your thoughts about that, about, building your strategy, and who do you talk to? Where do you balance these things off of?
Well, I think it depends on what stage your business is in as well, right? I mean, if you're just starting up and it's you and two other people that are working, you're going to be in the business as much as you are going to be, looking at where you're going big picture wise. However, you do get to a point where you have to step outside of, the day to day and take a look at, the horizon, right? Like, that's what a CEO and entrepreneur is, right? They look out at the horizon, see something nobody else sees. We've all heard that saying before. And you can't do that if you don't take some time and spend some time doing it. What I suggest, if you're a very busy CEO and you're working in the business, it's not a bad thing. Again, your team likes to see that you're going to get in there and do stuff with them and work with them to create a successful business. But I did a lot of things, like I would take, a reading week, or I would take a weekend and go to the mountains and just work on the business and take yourself out of the business completely and read some good books, as resources. If you belong to, any of the clubs like YPO, CEO, YEO, Foresight, where you can get additional help, where you can talk to other CEOs, because you're right, it is lonely at the top. And, you're not going to, try to go to your team and go, where do you think I should take this? Although I do that. Where do you think we should take this business next? I do that. But you also want to be able to go to other CEOs who've been there, done that, experienced the failures and the successes, and go, how did you do this? How did you achieve that? So having a mentor, having a forum group of peers that you could chat with is extremely helpful. That's been very helpful to me.
Yeah, and I would say the same. I'd say, my career, I built it up on building out a great network of professionals, of, like-minded individuals and others that, are completely different industries, and have an ability to reach out to that network to ask questions, or what do they see happening in their industry, gives you some other perspective, right? And then there's great books to be read, right? I just finished the Art of Thinking Clearly, which I thought was a fantastic book, and it just make you look and think about things a little differently. So I'm in the business. Yeah, that's where I get the pulse and the energy from our employees and our clients. You have to be there and participate in it, but you've got to think, after I make this next step, what is the next two steps potentially looking like, and making sure that you're thinking those through, whether it's for financing or growth or the next market. As an example, right now, Virum is evaluating potentially, doing a Series B fundraise as well, to just gas pedal and go after more additional growth. Well, if we're going to do that in 12 months, I really have to understand, what does the venture capital markets look like today, and are valuations favorable? Are they going the wrong way? Is inflation causing a problem? Oops, we have a potential world war going on, where like all of this stuff can change, right? So it's, you pull money in earlier to insulate the business and then ride through potentially another downturn, or do we wait and grow the revenue line to get a potentially better valuation, but the cash might not be there after? So you got to discuss and think about all these different things. But I think it's having conversations like this and talking to other, people in the business community, where you start to get enough data to make the right decisions.
Right. Actually, you made an interesting point, and I truly actually really like the idea that you put out there about being a contrarian and going where everybody else isn't, because you really don't want to be at the same place where everybody else is, and being in a crowd. And you did one other thing that you did raise, that it was I actually started laughing when you talked about surprising a board. That's always really fun to watch. If you're not the one that had that happen, you can sit back and see, like, this is not going to go well. But so, okay, speaking of boards, how do you make sure that you formed, you're going to be ultimately responsible? You need a board, and at early stages, it's not a board that is you're kind of inheriting, you're building this. So how do you go from building an advisory board to building a corporate board, and making sure that you have the right people on it, and not just, your friends or family or somebody that put money in, which tends to not necessarily go well either? So how do you actually make sure that, because ultimately that's going to be not just your advisors, they're going to be your boss. So how do you make that work properly and form it? Thoughts on that? I know, Desiree.
Well, the boards I work with, we utilize a skills matrix. We've got our strategy, we've got our targets and KPIs, we know what we need to do, and then we have to look and see, do we have the board that, can help fulfill that strategy. So based on what you're missing, right? So you look at your skills matrix and go, we need somebody who understands digital marketing, or, we need somebody who's strong at finance and, analytics. And that's how we would do it. And then you just have to go out there and see who's in the space as well that, has the expertise that you need, because it's not just about being, a financial guru, it's being a financial guru in BPO services, or, exactly what you're looking for. So it's really honing it down to what skills you need, and then who are the sort of gurus in that space that you want to go and tap on the shoulder and get them excited about joining your board.
Yeah, and I was fortunate with Virum. I inherited a strong board, and we've built on that board since I've taken over as CEO. But we do the same. We do an annual skills matrix, identify, maybe gaps that we have as we look at that. And anytime you're raising more capital, it generally comes with somebody who wants a board seat, right? So then you're going to have to talk about, rotating investors out, and there's different skill sets at various different stages. But I think the big one is diversity at a board level, right? And in the absence of not having that, you better have a diverse advisory board, or people that you draw upon to get different perspectives. And that includes, It could be different backgrounds, could be different gender, could be different industries that they've served, different roles. And diversity, as long as you have a good working relationship and good communication with that board, then you're set up for success.
What happens if there's somebody wrong on the board and you really is just the wrong person? How do you guys use term limits on boards? How do you actually address those things?
Well,
Go ahead, Desiree.
no, I was going to say, well, first, you want to have those things in your, board bylaws and, TORs, that sort of thing, right? Your terms of reference, you want to make sure that those things are built in for the just in case situation that might happen where, you need to move a board member off. I would think that's probably one of the most difficult things that can happen within an organization. And I've seen some companies actually, really stumble when they've had an issue with board members. It can be quite detrimental to the rest of the organization. So yeah, I think if you have something that's in place that everybody's aware of, this is the process. That's very helpful just from that angle. But David, I'm sure you have more to add to that.
Yeah, no, I'd say if you've got your bylaws set up in term limits, then you've put the vehicle in place so that you can have, call it a successful transition. If you've got an individual that's not, doing their best or providing that success for you, in the absence of that, be prepared for some awkward and difficult discussions and a bit of a political game that you're going to go through, because you got to steer through it, right? And so sometimes you need more leverage. Maybe it's a new investor coming in that's going to help you adjust the board, right? So it's, you want X, I need Y, and you help craft that Y with the incoming investment.
It's shifting gears a little bit about you made a comment about the stuff that's going on. Obviously, globally, we've got lots of problems taking place. How do you deal with the I'm going to say the personal, the mental health challenges we've now got? Obviously, we're now going to have people that have been out of office for 2 years, like not just 2 weeks, and going back in. This is going to be creating, Desiree, we were talking at the beginning, how, I'm not sure how I actually even feel about some of these things. So obviously you've got your employees that are going to be challenged on these things. We've had events that took place like, been labeled as the Great Resignation. So making sure you get access to these people is not as simple as just, as you said, like going through what they're capable of and so forth. You're now having to manage in really challenging times that are changing. Thoughts on dealing with the emotions and the mental health challenges of that we're all going to be going through, and setting the examples for how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think you have to remember that we're all human, right? And really, it's about having compassion and empathy for your team. There's not going to be some 100% solution that somebody's going to come up with that's going to serve everybody well at this time. However, I will say that the great revelation about the Great Resignation is that corporations are finally understanding that their employees want better, their employees deserve better, and corporate culture and a purpose-driven environment, for me, are two key pieces of the why behind employee retention in the first place and employee happiness. So when you're able to deliver a great workplace environment, offer flexibility, because you're going to have to now, for work-life balance, and a compensation that allows people to enjoy their lives, not just pay the bills, that's the start of creating a place where people want to be. And that's going to be the minimum requirement for those organizations that believe that this is an issue created by the government or that it's going to dissipate with the passing of the pandemic. You're going to find yourselves in very challenging situation or a position when it comes to the talent front in the months and years to come. But that's just the baseline. If you truly want to create sustainable teams, then you have to provide them a much more ambitious goal than being profitable. You have to be purpose driven and have meaning for doing what you do every day.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's you can call it the Great Resignation, but it's just people have the opportunity now to really think about where they want to work, how they want to work, and who they want to work with, right? Not for, but with. And that's a different change. So as an example, we you know, we've now eclipsed the 2-year mark. Well, 4 months before the pandemic started, we signed a lease on a big office space downtown, of which we got to use for 4 months. And then we sent everybody home for the last 2 years. We're now viewing that office space as we're not going to have a requirement for anybody to come down and return to the office. In fact, the office will now be a place for collaboration, invention, culture building, but maybe you're more productive at home, and by all means work home, or maybe working at the cabin, you're more productive. So it's not about hours worked, it's just about productivity, right? And so open that up, right? The internet connections all work fine now. Cloud computing allows us to all do this, right? If this pandemic would have happened 10 years ago, there would have been a fundamental different challenge in the economy than what we had today. So that was timely. So Desiree makes the good point. You know, we've grown over 2 years at Virum. So we went from, like I mentioned, kind of 10 to 40-ish people. We actually only had one individual leave because they wanted a completely new career change and to go into accounting and finance versus tech sales. But everyone else has a purpose. They love our values, the culture we're building, the excitement, and the transparency that we're providing, right? So, but yeah, you also have to pay well and pay, you know, fair enough to keep the top talent in the organization. So we got to look at this regularly, and we do this almost at a quarterly basis. Are we engaged? Are we paying the right market rates? You know, what's next for us as we continue to grow?
So how do you deal with things like, as a CEO, you're running this, and the decision-making processes that are going to go on where, you know, you have everybody scattered, and there's other things that come out, like when you have really early junior people that are coming up into the organization and they need that mentorship, and they dealing with seeing what's actually happened when those environments actually don't necessarily even exist anymore. Are we not actually creating challenges for that and creating more problems for moving people through organizations and seeing all this? And how do you deal with then how do you know who's making what decision when you're in different places and so forth? I know it's really important to empower your people, but everybody also has to be, as we said earlier, on the same song sheet. So that dynamic of remote can create even more challenges for managing your businesses. Thoughts on that?
Well, I think you have to have some structure around these things, right? Especially if you're remote. Like our team is like 75% remote, right? And then the rest of us are in-house. We have a team of over 150 people now across the country, and it works well. I mean, we're flat. Like I said, our leadership team is very small. We meet on a weekly basis, and we use something called the Entrepreneurs Operational System, EOS. And basically, you know, there's platforms out there that keep people accountable to the projects you're working on and the time being spent and where you're at. And kind of like David said, you kind of have to trust people to be productive. You have to trust them to, you know, work the project, do the work that they're you know, supposed to be doing, and, you know, keep them excited about it, keep them engaged about it, keep them, you know, contributing and enabling them so that they feel like they're really making a difference in the work that they're doing. And you know, it works really well for us. You know, you do have to be structured and processed as much as you have to be agile and flexible. You know, it's a really fine balance.
Yeah. Yeah, we use, you know, systems like 15.5, which has HR functionality, but it's kind of performance management as well, and an ability for people to collaborate and give each other kind of, you know, high fives on good work. And so you start to see people recognizing each other in something you wouldn't traditionally have heard about, because we put this new system in place and people have gravitated to it, which is good. I think the other piece here too, you had mentioned, you know, how do you mentor, you know, a younger generation, maybe a new account executive, a new developer, right? So that's still process driven, and you still have to have those interactions. But one thing that I've seen is all the Zoom boxes are the same size. Okay. So now think about where you traditionally maybe have gone to the boardroom and you've got somebody that might be, you know, very verbose, or they want to speak all the time, et cetera, et cetera. everybody gets sort of that same little window and is put in a spot where they need to be very clear and articulate, and there's no big person in the room anymore, right? So it's given a lot of people an opportunity to maybe have a voice they didn't before. So we'll see how that changes going forward.
One of the things that I heard one of the other CEOs talk about was that when they had their teams actually scattered in multiple locations and globally in multiple locations, made an interesting comment that they do have their meetings, they do have all of this stuff going on, so they have this. And he said, I have absolutely no clue what's actually going on. He felt like totally removed because he didn't get to sit out and have, the little office cooler, like the water cooler chat or those things, that he felt disconnected. And he ended up, in actual practice, what happened is people were getting picked off because he didn't get to sit there and talk to these. So it'll be an interesting thing as we are now going back to see how we've gone from one extreme where we would never do Zoom or any of these things to the next extreme where that's all we did, to there's going to be something that's new. But one of the questions I was asked about, how do you use the compensation and overbase or the equity ownership or ESOPs? How important are those elements to the attraction and retention of your people from your guys' perspective?
Well, I know with
go ahead, David.
Yeah, I was just going to say in regards to ESOP. So here's an example of a mistake I made. So thinking that employee stock options were incredibly valuable, right? So you still have to have a competitive base salary, and that's sort of like this additional future earnings opportunity. Foolishly, as we're rolling this out and growing the company, we didn't do anywhere near the right amount of effort to actually articulate what that program meant and what that value could be. And it was just lost. It was lost on people. And then so we've had to go back and re-educate and do this again regularly, because we thought we had a tool that was, silver bullet, and this is going to help to retain and grow and attract people. But a lot of people just don't understand what those are, and no fault of their own. They never participated in one before. So we can't just make assumptions. And so going back in time, I would have, put together an educational, system on this is what your OTE is, and this is the ESOP program, because otherwise it's just 4 letters that mean nothing to a lot of people. Yeah.
Yeah, we looked at that as well, and we opted not to do ESOP. We opted to do sharing of percentage of profitability, which works really well because they get it right away. It's something that they don't have to wait to cash in to get or see later, so that they see it, as a bonus on their paycheck. And that's, for our frontline people, that's valuable to them because they need the cash now, or they want to be rewarded now. But it's also about the other rewards that you do. When you think about, engaging people and keeping people, retaining people in your organization, for us, it's about doing the things that they feel proud of to continue working in your organization. So we do a lot of philanthropy. We have our Good Call program where 2% of our top line of our revenue goes to charities locally, nationally, and internationally. We do videos. We have, some of the charities that we work with, they do videos and send it to our team so that they can, connect directly with what we're doing from a philanthropic aspect. And they're really proud of that. And, just recently I was talking to some of my team members and saying, what do you love about our organization? We interview one team member, every month for our newsletter, and, only the frontline people, right? Not anybody in leadership. And the things that I always hear in these interviews is, we love what SureCall does for the community. We love that we're community builders. We love that we empower and educate females in underserved communities. So they bring up all of the charitable things that we do, and we offer them volunteer days, right, where they can go and work for the charity of their choice, and we pay them for that day to do that. So those things that are meaningful to people, believe it or not, have a lot of immediate impact and connection for the team and keep them on board.
Okay, so one question for both of you, and we're getting close to the end. If you could have one do-over from your role, from your time as a CEO, and what created that? What would be that do-over?
Oh, good question. It's a good question. I think I'll put mine just in a financing capacity. I don't care how much money you think you need. You should probably triple it because you'll want to spend it quicker. You want to grow faster, and there's always things happening, right? So you can try to like prevent dilution and just create this milestone piece, but you'll always need more than you want. So maybe would have swung a little higher in some of the early rounds, but yeah, I think maybe I would consider raising more money when we had an opportunity to do so.
I like that one because we see so many teams that are so worried about the dilution and thinking about, well, I'm giving up too much right now, giving up too much, and it's like on the other side, it might have made your company's ability to execute and your ability to focus on the other things about the people building and so forth when you're not focused on having to go just doing another raise right away. Desiree, any thoughts about your do-over?
Honestly, I know this is going to sound strange, but I don't think I would do anything over because, some of the biggest, like I said, the biggest mistakes that I've made and the biggest oops that I've done have often led to innovation or often led to something way better than I ever imagined I would have done. They push me to take risk or they push me to do things differently. So, I made like some major mistakes with, large clients where I've lost large clients and, because, of not, wanting to compromise certain values and things like that. And, it was detrimental on the company for a while. But then we were able to push past that. But I'm really glad that I made that decision because it changed the way I thought about who should we be doing business with and change the customer base and the value proposition that, we move forward with. So I really don't think there's a do-over for me. I think I needed to have those things happen for us to get to where we are today.
You know what I love about that is that it says, don't be afraid of making the mistakes. Like it just made, so you made a decision. You don't have all the information. It's going to play out one way or the other. And so you don't get paralyzed in, the analysis paralysis or these different things where you say, okay, as a CEO, I got to make this. I don't have all that. This is where we're going and we'll deal with whatever happens next. So I appreciate that. I got to thank you. And I'm sure our audience really appreciated all the time that you spent with us. It's so important to know that they're not alone in this journey. It's like, it is a lonely journey when you're at this point. So hopefully they can reach out and connect with you on your LinkedIn or however they want to talk to you and continue to share the dialogue. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to Stephen, but really appreciate that. There's going to be a survey there that you guys can address. Please give us our feedback if this has been helpful to you. It does help us going forward. If you know that there's topics that you want us to address, again, let us know and we'll work on bringing that out. Stephen.
Thank you very much, James. A wonderful and engaging moderation of two fantastic speakers. Thank you so much for the wisdom you shared. I think you can see in the chat and the questions how much it resonated with some folks, both agreeing and looking for more details. As James said, really appreciate the post-event survey. Let us know if this is what you want more of or other topics that we can kind of help you with. Coming up next month, April 12th, cybersecurity is going to be our topic. So we're going to have some speakers on that. Don't miss out. Again, there's so much you have to know from sort of the culture building, how to establish the team, all the things we discussed today. But we'll be diving into cybersecurity next week because that's something we don't want to overlook. And again, help us understand what topics you would like us to address in these fireside chats. Check out our events page for all the other things I detailed at the top of the hour. And I hope you have a great day.